Oh, hello there. Yes, well, we are trundling through the week, aren't we? Where's it going? Anyway, yes. Today I thought I'd sort of continue with that kind of aren't our commentary at rubbish line. And today I just thought we'd have a quick look at those lovely people over at Spiked who definitely live up to that Green Day line about finding that the money's on the other side. People that will never break into a sweat doing any form of work whatsoever. That's for you, saps, whilst they tell you exactly how badly exploited you are by persons unknown. Yeah, they have this kind of weird view of populism in the idea that because your granddad used to come out with sort of half-baked very common sense things that did really, upon investigation, didn't make any sense at all. That's what populism is. And they tend to have Frank Furedi and the crew there do tend to have very dodgy links, shall we say, especially to Tufton Street, and even more worryingly to the Orbán government in Hungary, who have been spending a great deal of money to influence on a kind of anti-woke culture wars line people like, drumroll, Joanna Williams, who I'm going to have a look at today. She's somebody who has an educational background, so she knows about education, but you'd never guess it from anything that she writes. She's one of these people that just automatically assumes that you will agree with her and therefore can't be bothered to actually write anything that makes any real sense. To which this landed yesterday in my Twitter feed. Lessons about fake news are indoctrination masquerading as education. OK then, Labour is exploiting the unrest to bring politics further into the classroom. OK, that sounds quite serious, doesn't it? We do tend to hear quite a lot about indoctrination in the classroom, very often from people at Spiked and GB News and the Free Speech Union. And a lot of my videos in the past have debunked this. You can catch some of them if you care to trawl through them. Please don't, because they're getting old now. But each time they bring out these reports, which swear blind that things are happening in the classroom, I have a look at them and magically I've discovered that they're not actually real. Anyway, she talks generically about kids being involved in the rioting, which some of them were. So she then finishes up with this notion that it's hard not to conclude that some of these kids will be better served by a clip around the ear than a criminal record. Well, okay, but again, you can hear your granddad there, can't you? Oh, they just need a clip round the ear. Right, so in other words, people need some form of punishment, but we no longer live in a country whereby, just generically hitting people is seen as a good idea, so we tend to go through the courts, Joanne. The courts, like we're doing. It's a metaphorical clip round the ear, which doesn't actually involve anyone getting any brain damage. Much better idea, I think. Anyway, moving on. Let's go to the nitty-gritty. Unfortunately, it seems that many adults are determined to draw precisely the wrong lessons about the teen rioters. I wonder who, Joanne. Take Labour's Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson. In response to the recent disorder, she wants to teach children how to spot extremist content and fake news online. Good. Something, actually, that your usual GB News and Spiked commentator would suggest in the past would be a really good idea. That whole thing about teaching kids to think for themselves and not take on board all that propaganda. I'll come back to that. She wants lessons in regular subjects like English and maths to arm, in inverted commas, pupils against, in inverted commas, putrid conspiracy theories. And you think to yourself, OK, good. She wants children as young as 5 to be taught how to identify misinformation. OK, you can see roughly where she's going with this. Yet the idea that a few lessons in spotting fake news will transform rogue teens into upstanding citizens is laughable. OK, Joanne, but of course that isn't the intention. We don't actually know what this is yet. I mean, there's a key thing to say about this is she is simply, throwing rocks at straw education secretaries here because we don't know what this stuff is going to entail. And it's easy for somebody who isn't in education, which I'll remind you Joanne is, to just poo-poo the idea of teaching kids anything. Oh, they can't learn anything, these kids. They have no respect for teachers. They don't learn anything. See, it's that granddad thing again, isn't it? Except, of course, those countries that actually do that tend to have young people that, are very well equipped for spotting misinformation online, like Finland, linked down below. Now, Joanne knows that. I know that, and I know that Joanne knows that. But Joanne is hoping that other people that read this won't know that, and she's sure as hell not going to tell them. Now, just a few lessons in anything won't solve anything, because you're dealing with a massive organisation that is society itself. Of course not. However, it's important to keep children safe online, and when they need to be kept safe from ideologues like Joanne, like Spiked, like Viktor Orban's government, I would argue. Anyway, moving on. Worse, Philipson seems to assume that the distinction between fake news and truth is so obvious it can be taught to 5-year-olds. And again, we get that disingenuous thing from her. Well, it depends on what you're trying to do, isn't it? But a lot of the GCSE curriculum, for example, in ICT, well, not a lot of it, is about, pointing children out about things like clickbait. Now, I grant that's not 5-year-olds, but you have to start somewhere. And again, we don't know exactly what these proposals are. But this woman is poo-pooing it, a woman who relies on dodgy money from overseas into her various tendrils in think tanks to make a living. I wonder why she wouldn't want young people to be able to spot not brilliant articles when they see them. You can make up your own mind about that. But the small school curriculum is hardly immune to quackery. In recent years, plenty of children have been taught that sex is randomly assigned at birth rather than being a biological fact determined by a person's chromosomes. And those of you that know my previous videos on this will know full well that they're not. That isn't something that's taught at all. And despite the fact of what GB News and Spiked and Viktor Orban might think, it just simply isn't a thing. But never mind, we can just glibly throw that one out because the idea is that you're too stupid to know different. Would Labour teach pupils to spot this misinformation? Well, hopefully so. All the signs suggest no. Oh, well, there we go then. Again, there's no point in doing this, you see, because kids are too smart. They're too smart to do that, and therefore they probably don't need it, and therefore I'm not quite sure what my argument is anymore. No, I don't know, Joanne. If you don't think it's a good idea to arm children to spot very dodgy researchers from dodgy think tanks, that's entirely your choice. But then you have to assume that kids are too bright already to do that, whilst at the same time arguing magically that they're under nefarious influences from other places. It doesn't really add up. This means that if Philipson gets her way, teachers could spend the morning warning children about the dangers of fake news and the afternoon telling them men could become women. Yes, they could do. They could also be playing softball, which involves batting hedgehogs. But again, that's something that isn't going to happen, isn't it? It's just, it's that glib thing. If you look at her book reviews on Amazon, loads of people say about the way that she'll just simply throw glib things in with no evidence whatsoever. That's one of them. We can all decry the lies and rumours that were spread in the wake of the Southport atrocity, but it's hard not to escape the suspicion that the distinction Philipson wants to draw between misinformation and truth is simply whether ideas conform to her and her pals' worldview more broadly. And again, for somebody from Spiked, I'll just leave that notion hanging in the air there, because they are a crew who do not understand the word irony at all, or at least they pretend that they don't, because that might interfere with the revenue stream. Lessons in fake news will hasten the blurring between education and indoctrination. Okay, where's the evidence for that? Where is the evidence that that's exactly what's going to happen, bearing in mind that we don't have any details of what this education might entail? And the answer is, well, I can just make stuff up, can't I? Yes, I think it'll be in the third paragraph where they're giving instructions directly to schools. You know that line that says teaching kids to be trans, and about how you're going to spend an afternoon at least doing that. I think it's in there of the thing that doesn't exist. There you are, Joanne. That's easy, isn't it? This is not to say schools will have no role in preventing future public disorder. Okay, yeah. Maybe we're getting to the educational bit now, Joanne. Good schools give pupils a knowledge-rich curriculum to provide the foundation for critical thinking and some sense of a national story we can all unite behind. Yes, it's not necessarily the knowledge-rich curriculum, it's just simply the national curriculum. It's what we have to do. It's that British values thing. Young people need teachers as subject experts to be authoritative and set high standards for both learning and behaviour. Yes, or we can be fired, we know that. Perhaps more than anything, they need politics to be left at the school gate. Phillipson promises none of this. No, she doesn't. But there again, neither did Michael Gove when he came here. I don't recall him promising that, and I don't recall Gillian Keegan, the last one, promising that either, because it's not their job to promise things that you would just expect them to do under the current statutory framework anyway. But never mind. Once again, we end up with these straw figures that we can throw things at. Yes, politics to be left at the school gate. Well, politics is out there, and when you're teaching 14 plus pupils, they will bring up politics themselves. 14-year-olds tend to develop a worldview which will, with some of them, develop in and around political ideas. I'm sure some of you out there can recall when you were 14 and you probably had a burgeoning sense of the world and your place within it. Some of the rioters undoubtedly will have been motivated by stuff that they've seen online, politically speaking. Schools cannot ignore that. Can't ignore that. You can put both sides to people. You can present a moral argument for various things, which again is part of the national curriculum. But Joanne wants you to believe magically that schools can exist in a world where politics doesn't. Do you know all those people that argue that, you know, politics needs to be left out of sport and then don't have any problems when Russia is banned from things but Israel isn't? That's exactly where this one comes from. It's whatever suits their particular paymasters at that precise moment in time. It isn't a moral position at all. Okay? The politicisation, that's a hard word to say, of education has already done a lot of damage. Just a couple of years ago, during lockdown, today's teenagers shut out the schools, sports, clubs and community centres. Yeah, if they had any. Social bonds and obligations were discarded. Well, okay, it's a bit glib. Then came the Black Lives Matter protests. Did they? Okay. Their message was that all cops are bastards. Okay, apropos of nothing there. Instead of challenging this, the schools reopened with a BLM-inspired curricula. No, they didn't. That's just something that she's conjured completely out of air. There is nothing there. Okay, I didn't magically after COVID come back with a new curricula. It was the same one. Okay, it's the same one. And if she wants us to believe that the education secretaries, and let's face it, who can remember who all of them are, because some of them are only in place for about 3.5 days, from the Conservative Party would have come back with a BLM-inspired curricula. Good luck with trying to prove that, Joanne, yeah? I mean, I know you're a researcher, but yeah, that's an amazing stretch. And you notice the way this just bounced all over the place, from COVID to Marxist indoctrination of children, just in one breath there, basically. They give lessons in white privilege. And again, those of you that know will know that I have debunked that very, very thoroughly in quite a few of my videos. There are no lessons in the UK that are given on white privilege whatsoever. If a child asks a question about the term white privilege and the teacher answers it, that isn't a lesson on white privilege at all. Okay? You cannot live in a world where you can ban children from asking questions about things that are out there in the media. I know that the magical world that Joanne lives in, she would like that to be true, and she wants to persuade you that actually magically that might happen as well. It's unicorn territory. Including children who saw little prospect of ever landing a decent house or job. Okay, you notice the way again she just shoehorned things in there. None of this has been exactly conducive to social cohesion. Okay then, but saying to young people about racial injustice causes riots then, does it? If we didn't mention social injustice, something we're required to do, by the way, in the national curriculum, and Joanne knows that, and I know that, you know that, but she's pretending that the rest of you don't. Yeah? Yeah, that's what we have to teach. Should we not teach about MLK? Should we not teach about Gandhi? Should we not teach about Nelson Mandela? Should we just say that whenever we're teaching about Nazi Germany, that it was a morally ambiguous point when we get to the Holocaust? Of course not. These things are inherently political, aren't they? And we need to arm young people with the ability to spot, for example, fascism when they see it. Coming to the end. Rather than changing course, the new government wants to double down on political indoctrination with a deranged plan, lovely language there, to instruct all 5-year-olds in the perils of misinformation. None of this is in the best interest of children, and it will certainly do nothing to prevent another round of riots. Okay then, but you notice that the political indoctrination, there's that automatic view that you will believe that after 14 years of Conservative government that teachers are magically teaching Marxism in the classroom. I mean, I am, granted, because I teach sociology, but that's another thing, of course. Anyway, as an old maths teacher of mine might have said, utter bunkum, but really par for the course for Joanne. You will notice, I mean, this is her just simply banging something out without bothering to find anything about. And again, it treats you with contempt. It certainly treats me with contempt as a teacher, because it's saying that I'm doing things that I patently can't legally whatsoever do. Anyway, I hope that Viktor Orban money has enabled her to have a lovely, lovely holiday, and I expect to see an awful lot more, because there isn't very much of it, from her work with Policy Exchange. But she'll crop up in various places, telling us about what's going on, with no evidence whatsoever. And yet, magically, it's me that is indoctrinating people. Anyway, on that bombshell, do have a lovely day. Enjoy. Dangerously close to the weekend.